Oh, it is a good time to be a dress-up game girly. This, in case you didn't read the title, is Infinity Nikki, the fifth game in the Nikki franchise. Now, for those of you who didn't spend your teen years white-knuckling a Kindle Fire on the bus or your early 20s with little impulse control regarding microtransactions, let me catch you up to speed on what you've missed. This is Nikki. Nikki is a roughly 18 to 20-year-old girl who stars in several Chinese-made dress-up games that all have her name somewhere in the title. And this is Momo, Nikki's barbecue-loving talking cat companion. The Nikki franchise has been around since 2012 and started with Nikki Up to You, which was literally just a cute little dress-up game with no real bells and whistles from what I can remember. Buy items, put on clothes that match the theme you're given, buy more items, put on more clothes, rinse and repeat, you get it. I spent too much time playing this game on my Kindle Fire in high school while I was on my way to school, and this was my gateway into the Nikki franchise. Then came Nikki Up to You 2 World Traveler, or as it was known as in English, Hello Nikki, Let's Beauty Up. Nikki travels the world with Momo and her sister, who is either called Yo-Yo or Nina, depending on which game and version you're playing. This one had more of a story and was where we started to see the introduction of some more visual novel-esque elements, but it was still pretty much a standard dress-up game. The third entry in the series, Nikki Up to You 3 Miracle Nikki, also known as Miracle Nikki, or to most of the English-speaking audience, Love Nikki, is I think where a lot of players first entered the franchise, and where I realized that my early mornings spent playing the first game on public transit were, in fact, not a fever dream. This game saw a lot more of the visual novel elements, more content, and oh my god, all the microtransactions. In Love Nikki, Nikki and Momo are transported to Mirrorland by Queen Nanari to change the fate of Mirrorland, which means the game also marks our official introduction to Mirrorland. Mirrorland is a world where all conflicts, and I do mean all, are solved via styling battles. Love Nikki spoilers start here. I'll probably mark somewhere on screen or in the chapters or something where they end. So why does everyone solve their problems with style battles instead of just handling things the old-fashioned way? Well, that's actually really easy. Everyone in Mirrorland is born with a blood curse, and anyone who engages in violence will be subject to immeasurable levels of physical pain. Yeah, I feel so bad for anyone whose first game is Infinity Nikki. You've been missing out. Next, we have the fourth game, Shining Nikki, which I never actually got around to playing since it came out in summer 2021, and I was going through some things during that time. That said, Shining Nikki was the first game we got to see Nikki in 3D, and I remember being absolutely mesmerized by the graphics when I watched the first trailer. Man, if only that version of me knew what we were in for this year. Which finally leads us to this month and the highly anticipated release of Infinity Nikki. Now, before I get too far into talking about how amazing this game is, I want to go ahead and just issue a quick disclaimer. Unfortunately, you guys are going to notice some awkward quirks with the graphics. I'm going to be completely transparent when I say that is almost 100% not on the developers of the game. Matter of fact, the graphics in this game are some of the most stunning I have seen, and give me a lot of hope of what's to come from the next generation of games, visually speaking. That is where our problem lies, though, as I am actually due for several upgrades on my PC, and unfortunately, my graphics card, as much as I absolutely adore this thing, is out of date and not within the minimum specs for the game. So just keep that in mind. Any clipping or glitching or anything else you see is very likely because of my hardware and almost definitely not because of the developers. Alright, disclaimer out of the way, let's talk about Infinity Nikki. From what I've gathered, Nikki does not seem to have her memories from the previous games, and this may or may not be related to something that happened within those games, as the story in previous entries seems to play quite a bit with different timelines, time travel, and memory loss. But because I never played Shining Nikki, I'm not in a position to say whether or not that is the case here, or if this is simply a clean slate story separate from the others, though I'm not inclined to believe that due to what I do know from the story of Love Nikki. What I am in a position to say, though, is that this game is great. Oh my god, this video is probably coming 3 or 4 weeks after release at this point, because I have spent more time playing the game than I have actually making content about it. So, obviously I already mentioned the graphics being too powerful for my PC, but seriously, even with the issues I've had, this game is absolutely breathtaking from a visual standpoint. I highly encourage you to watch the official trailers or some gameplay from someone with a more capable machine because honestly, I am just constantly impressed with how beautiful this game is. The details in every outfit are just stunning, and I struggle to compare it with anything I've seen before in that regard. Like, seriously, look at this. Amazing. 10 out of 10. But hey, graphics aren't everything. Let's get into the meat of things. There was some drama when the game first released with the Genshin Impact fandom claiming that the game felt like a Genshin clone, which... There's comparable elements, but I think maybe we need to remember that Genshin isn't the first game to involve gacha mechanics, an open world setting that's primarily fields where you occasionally bonk into enemies, or where the player chooses to change visual elements and abilities to better suit the obstacles ahead, solve puzzles, or really anything else. I don't say this as a Genshin hater, by the way. I think there's plenty of valid criticism to be had about Genshin, but those criticisms aside, I did play it for quite some time and I really enjoyed it. But I enjoyed it for many of the same reasons I enjoyed Breath of the Wild, and yeah, I enjoy much of the gameplay in Infinity Nikki for those same reasons. Open world games that encourage map exploration and discovery are just good. There's a reason we've seen more of them in recent years, and you're not going to catch me claiming Infinity Nikki is a Genshin clone, the same way you're not going to catch me calling Genshin a Breath of the Wild clone. There's similarities, there's differences, to each their own. I personally just really love how much there is to find and do around the map in Infinity Nikki, so much so that it took me a long time to carry on with the main quest and unlock even fairly early areas of the game, because there was just so much to explore. This is a game where if you don't want to carry on with the story just yet, you don't have to. You can just wander and you will still have fun. Style battles, while pretty obviously a hair less prominent in Infinity Nikki compared to Love Nikki, are still absolutely present and directly involved in story progression. The mechanics are the same as they have been in previous games, which admittedly can lead to some interesting choices in order to maximize your score, especially early on. Which has always been one of my main critiques of the Nikki series. There's some things that just clash enough, it feels like maybe you should have some deduction in points for it, but I guess as they say, a win is a win. Regarding the story, I've really wanted to avoid spoilers as much as possible for this video since it is a really story-rich game, and obviously, I want as many people to be able to experience it as possible without having it totally ruined for them. But I will say that Chapter 2 100% sold me on the story for this entry. Chapter 1, while it does touch on some of the heavier aspects of the story, doesn't necessarily pull you all the way into it, likely because it is the introductory chapter, and so it carries the dual weight of needing to get you used to the gameplay and controls, the many user interfaces, and introduce the main cast and their conflicts, but Chapter 2 allows us to really start getting into it, and man, they really just drove right into the heart with this one. I won't spoil it, but to those who have already played this section, if you know, you know. The backgrounds and stories of so many of the characters feel well thought out and really hit home sometimes. And I know I said I was done talking about graphics, but I don't really know if this counts. The character designs are just so good to look at, and the voice acting really doesn't hurt anything either. Also, close enough, welcome back Pura. Speaking of the Switch-era Zelda games, I will say that a lot of the puzzles in Infinity Nikki really do remind me of the shrine challenges in the modern Zelda games, but for me, points of similarity are not a negative, and this just means I have some decent idea of what I'm doing with more of the puzzles in this game. I'd like to end off my notes on this game by addressing an elephant in the room that I briefly mentioned earlier, that being the gacha mechanics. Now, I'll preface this by saying I did know from the moment the game was announced that Infinity Nikki would have a gacha system. I knew that there would be paid currency, outfits behind a paywall, all of that. I don't think a single person who played Love Nikki is surprised by this, and I think that these kinds of paid mechanics have, for better or worse, become commonplace in free-to-play games. Personally, I'm not actually fond of gacha mechanics in games that are hard or impossible to complete without spending real money, as they create a large amount of FOMO and use what I believe to be manipulative and predatory tactics to get people to spend money they otherwise wouldn't. Of course, I understand why gachas exist, particularly in free-to-play games. Realistically, it's one of the only ways for developers of these games to see any kind of profits and income, and I do believe that if you make a product worth consuming that people enjoy, you should be able to benefit from that financially. Believe me, as an artist and content creator, I 100% get it. Developers deserve to be paid, full stop. But, for me, personally, I think I'd rather spend the $40 to $80 up front on a game and have access to all of the content that game has to offer, rather than putting up with microtransactions, especially ones where you're not even guaranteed the items you want. Credit where credit's due, the Infinity Nikki gachas are all cosmetic. So yeah, technically you're not missing out on any additional content that actually matters to the story, but especially in a game that's literally centered on fashion, having a large chunk of the available outfits stuck behind a paywall, or at the very least making them incredibly difficult to get without spending money, feels a little icky. And I do say this as someone who, as I mentioned earlier, did get sucked into the gachas of Love Nikki. I know it sounds hypocritical. I know if I didn't want to see them use gacha mechanics in later titles, maybe I shouldn't have contributed to the problem. But my first-hand experience with the predatory nature of gachas in that game has really driven home my feelings about these mechanics in games. It's also why I told myself from day one I'm not spending actual money on Infinity Nikki's gachas. I'll use the free currency I get from progression, and if that's not enough to get the outfits, I'm just gonna have to live with that. Maybe down the line they'll release a complete version like Animal Crossing Pocket Camp, where you'll be able to unlock paid items for free through progress, and if they do, I'll happily pay for it. This is a game that would be well worth an actual retail rate price tag. But until then, I'm digging in my heels on this one. I don't want to end this video on a sour note. I really love Infinity Nikki. It's a very fun and beautiful game. The story and the characters in the world are great, and I'm so glad this game is out now. I've had an absolute blast playing it, and I do plan to continue, but I just can't help but think I would have been happier if they had slapped a $60 price tag on it and given us monthly or even seasonal updates with new outfits that could be crafted or bought with the free in-game currency, instead of putting players in a position where they feel like they have to participate in microtransactions or they're missing out. I know it's not unheard of. These kinds of overpriced cosmetic microtransactions have been around in gaming for a long time now, and they're probably not going away anytime soon, but it doesn't make them any less annoying. Anyways, my feelings about microtransactions aside, Infinity Nikki is genuinely a great game. As a kid who grew up playing on the Nintendo GameCube and PlayStation 2, I had no idea games would look this good when I grew up. The story is rich and the cast so well designed. The outfits are adorable, and come on, you get to walk around and brush just about any furry friend you can find in the game. I would recommend anyone who likes open world exploration games, cozy games, or fashion games to give this one a go. Just maybe think twice before you start paying into the gacha system. Anyways, thanks for watching, and until next time, stay cozy.